This is a story with no beginning. And like any story with no beginning, it doesn't really matter where to begin. But let's begin in the last decade of the 16th century, a century which saw the rise of the Urdar clan. Never before has Haran seen a single family rule over such a vast expanse. The head of the family was Kren the Younger, son of the legendary Kren Urdar. Kren the Younger's two sons, Hia and Iar, have unexpectedly ventured west and struck a deal with the governor of Delbar, promising him the hand of their sister. Eager to become part of the powerful house, the governor proclaimed Delbar to be under Urdar rule. The brothers then marched on Kemeyar, a major trade center of the region, and took control over it. Kemeyar, basically a huge market, was not officially under the rule of any kingdom or state, but was unofficially under control of the Urdars. This set up a conflict between the brothers and the rest of the family, and Kren the Younger sent their uncle, Pharaoh, to fix the situation. The first thing Pharaoh did was bribe Delbar's generals and take control of the city. Unaware of any deal that the governor had with the brothers, and probably not caring to learn, he threw him in prison and effectively became governor himself. That didn't go well with Hia. He seemed to not take Kren the Younger's ire seriously, so he had his brother Iar march back on Delbar with a significant regiment and set up siege. This is when citizens of Delbar began to feel that they were being used as pawns in the Urdar power games. So what they did was throw Pharaoh out, close the gates, and proclaim independence from the Urdar clan altogether. That seemed to satisfy Iar, who took Pharaoh as prisoner and went back. Using Pharaoh as a bargaining chip, Hia suggested to exchange Pharaoh for the city of Orden, and thus expand his influence even further. Pharaoh was not only Kren the Younger's brother, he was also his protege, friend, and successor to the throne. And so Kren the Younger agreed to Hia's terms. The exchange was to happen in front of the Orden gates, between Hia and the representative of the Urdar clan. But nobody showed up. Hia began to suspect an ambush and demanded Orden to open its gates. The gates were opened and Hia's army was let in without incident. Still suspecting foul play, Hia had been preparing for a possible battle when the news reached him. There was no ambush, but there was indeed foul play, because Kren the Younger was murdered, stabbed in his own throne room. What happened was that Kren the Younger's decision to submit to Hia and Iar's demands was interpreted as a sign of weakness and used by Nilma Urdar to overthrow him. Who's Nilma Urdar? Don't worry, we'll get to know him pretty soon. What's important is that he installed his son, the young and brazen Rodair, as head of the family. Rodair then immediately set off on a campaign to punish Hia. But the murder of Kren the Younger changed the power balance. Pharaoh, whose claim to the throne depended on his brother staying in power, now needed to get rid of Rodair. So Pharaoh joined Hia against the clan and recalled his own army from Urnell. Hia and Pharaoh were preparing for a battle at Orden when Rodair unexpectedly confronted Iar at Kemeyar. Iar was forced to retreat south, falling back to Orden, and Rodair followed him. This was now a bad situation for Hia. He had lost Delbar and Kemeyar and was now stuck with the small city of Orden, with Rodair's army swiftly approaching. But then something happened. Something that was completely unforeseeable at the time, but which was set up by a chain of events that happened a long time ago. Hia was told that a superhero warrior lived at Orden, a young lady by the name of Farnol. Her powers were said to be immense. She could vanish people and objects without a trace. And Hia certainly wished for Rodair and his army to suddenly disappear. Reluctant to help at first, Farnol eventually agreed, and as Rodair rode in front of his troops, and as he extended his sword towards the walls of the city, Farnol extended her arm towards the sky, and the mass of people that was about to charge at the city was no longer there, vanished without a trace. And this could have been it, an unexpected but very welcome happy end for Hia, Iar, and Pharaoh. But the story has not ended. In a very important sense, it was instead just beginning. What the young superhero warrior did not know herself was that her ability was not simply vanishing. Instead, she was displacing people and objects in space and time. Rodair and his army were thrown back 80 years, ending up in 1513. Not only that, but they found themselves approximately 350 kilometers to the east, in front of a small city called Lynn. Thinking it's still Orden, Rodair attacks the city, but the surprised city immediately opens the gates. Rodair demands to see Hia, Iar, and Pharaoh, but they're nowhere to be found. Thinking they tricked him and went back to Kameyar, he immediately marches back north. He reaches the city late at night and, believing it to be Kameyar, attacks. In reality, it was Tanaran, a stronghold considered to be unbeatable at the time and feared throughout the whole of Haran. Completely taken by surprise, Tanaran is defeated by Rodair's army, putting the Urdar name on the map for the first time. During the battle, however, Rodair is wounded and thrown off his horse. A soldier defends his life, and his name turns out to be Maksag. Touched by this act of bravery, Rodair proclaims them to be brothers forever. As the days go by, Rodair's wound continues to get worse. He's dying. He appoints Maksag as the commander-in-chief of his army. Maksag, born in a small northern city called Kren, and considered a foreigner in Tanaran, is afraid that his authority will be questioned. In order to allay his fears, Rodair changes his name to Kren to honor Maksag's hometown, while giving Maksag the last name of Urdar. And thus, Kren Urdar and Maksag Urdar appear for the first time in history. Anxious to make his name, Maksag immediately leads campaigns to the south and then to the east, expanding the Urdar rule and subjugating Ernel, Or, Kep, and eventually Laura in just under 2 years, making him extremely popular among his troops and feared throughout the region. Rodair, now known as Kren, manages to survive his wound, although his health is irreparably damaged, and he leaves the glory of warfare to Maksag. But Maksag never feels completely confident, because he's hiding a secret. Maksag's many successes are informed by Kren, who exhibits an uncanny knowledge of the future. With his help, Maksag overpowers Maerd and eventually takes over Montar, the only organized state in the region, securing a complete dominance of Urdars in Haran. A brief resistant movement against Maksag and Montar displaces many people and forces them to move to the west. Many of them eventually settle in Ernel, but some end up further to the west. One of the families settles in a small city of Orden, and in 1569, a baby is born into that family. It's a girl, and they name her Farnol. Kren, meanwhile, is preoccupied with an heir. He fathers several children in secrecy. After assessing them, he picks the one who he feels is worthy to be his successor, whom we today know as Kren the Younger. Kren the Younger receives extensive training both in combat and arts, especially history, politics, and military tactics. When the boy turns 12, Kren officially makes him head of the family, but keeps consulting him, lending him his insight into the future. The young ruler wants to continue to expand his influence by campaigning, but is held back by his father. It would later be theorized that Kren simply knew of no more Urdar conquests in the 16th century and either felt uncomfortable advising his son without his usual foreknowledge or did not want to change the course of history. Maksag also has several children, and one of them, Nilma Urdar, succeeds him on the throne. Nilma quickly establishes himself as a strong leader and shrewd politician. He develops a close friendship with Kren the Younger in Tanaran, and then strengthens the clan's grip on Kep by using diplomacy and sealing the deal with a marriage to Garona Tuorlemi, the daughter of the governor of Laura. This is seen as an important play as it undermines the role of the city of Kep and changes the power dynamics in the region from anti-Urdar to pro-Urdar. But there is something Nilma does not suspect, that his days as Montar's wise leader are numbered. Kren, knowing that one day Nilma would overthrow Kren the Younger, convinces his son to remove Nilma from power. A plot is staged upon which Nilma's loyalists and royal advisors are falsely accused of treason and promptly executed. The title of ruler is passed on to Garona, Nilma's wife, while Nilma, fearing for his life, disappears. Imagine how it must have felt, his life taken away from him, and he didn't even know why. One day you're one of the most powerful people of the realm, the next, you're a nobody living in hiding, and yet he doesn't give up. Instead, over the next 2 decades, he slowly rebuilds his influence in Montar, becoming Garona's an official advisor and a shadow figure behind many events in Montar and Kep. Not only that, his authority extends across Haran, and he is an influence in Or, Urnel, and even Toyen further to the south. Somewhere in the late 1580s, he moves with his son Rodair to Tanaran. By this time, he's not seen as a threat by Kren the Younger, but he begins using his significant and formal influence to prop up Rodair as a successor to Kren the Younger against Pharaoh. He begins to unite factions that are opposed to Kren the Younger's rule. He would forge letters from Tanaran in order to portray Kren the Younger as irrational and overly suspicious. He also begins corresponding with many of the Urdars and powerful governors throughout Haran in order to prepare the ground for the coup. It is at this point that Hia and Iar suddenly confront the family in the west by capturing Kameyar and also taking Pharaoh hostage. Kren the Younger makes a decision to exchange Pharaoh for the city of Orden. Nilma uses that decision as an opportunity, arguing that this is a sign of weakness and that this would bring the whole family down. As the clan convenes at Tanaran, Kren the Younger is murdered on the orders of Nilma, and Rodair proclaims himself head of the family. He then marches on Hia and Iar in order to subjugate them to his rule, and as he approaches Orden, Farnol extends her arm towards the sky.